Dear Dark Diary. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dear Dark Diary podcast. This episode is going to be in two parts, and I need you to stay with me for a bit because tonight we're going somewhere uncomfortable, but the good kind of uncomfortable, if there's anything like that. The kind that feels like finally taking off a shoe that's been too tight for years and realizing that's what it was. Dear Dark Diary, I've been sitting with a question. Not the kind that has a clean answer. Not the kind you Google at 2 a.m. and find a Reddit thread that sort of helps. The kind that just sits in your chest. Quiet, heavy, waiting for you to be brave enough to actually look at it. The question is this. Who are you not? Not who are you, not what are your values, what's your aesthetic, or what your vision board looks like. We've been doing that. We've been doing all of that for years. The journaling, the therapy, the personality test, the whole I'm a 4'5" Scorpio rising with abandonment issues energy. And still, a lot of us walk around feeling like strangers in our own lives, performing a version of ourselves that's close enough to the truth that nobody questions it, including us. So maybe the problem isn't that we don't know who we are. Maybe the problem is that we've never had the courage to look at everything we are not and admit that we've been wearing it anyways. Okay, so there's this concept in philosophy called Via Negativa. And before you click off, I promise this is relevant. I promise it's going somewhere that's going to mess you up in the best possible way. Via Negativa literally translates to the negative way. And the idea is this. Sometimes the most accurate way to understand something is not by describing what it is, but by removing everything it is not. You get to the truth by subtraction, by elimination, by having the honesty to sit there and say, not that either, and definitely not that. Ancient theologians used it to describe God, because they argued that any positive statement about something infinite immediately limits it. You can't fully define the infinite, but you can get closer to it by clearing away everything that it isn't. And then Nassim Taleb, modern philosopher, professional enjoyer of chaos, took the same concept and applied it to life decisions. He said knowing what to remove is often far more powerful than knowing what to add. Now, what if we applied that to identity? What if the reason so many of us can't figure out who we are is because we keep trying to build an identity instead of clearing one? What if you already know, somewhere deep in your body, in the part of you that goes quiet in certain rooms, who you are not? And what if you have always known? And the real work is just having the honesty to stop pretending otherwise. Dear Dark Diary, let me tell you about some of the identities I've worn and some that maybe sound familiar. Not the dramatic ones, not the I used to be a different person main character arc with the makeover montage. The quiet ones. The ones that looked completely normal from the outside and the ones that nobody questioned, including me. So for a long time I called myself an introvert. Everybody knows it. My friends know it, my family know it. And I said it with such confidence, like it was just a fact about me, like my blood type, or the way I take my tea, or my skin color. I'm an introvert. That's just who I am. But here's the thing nobody tells you about identity. Sometimes the most convincing ones aren't the ones you choose. They're the ones that were chosen for you, and then you just agreed. I grew up being kept inside, being told not to go out, not to explore, not to move freely in the world. I always got the how many times has your friend come to your house that you have to go to theirs. And somewhere along the way, I took that external restriction and I made it internal. I convinced myself that I didn't want the things I was being kept from, that I preferred the walls, that I preferred to be inside, because it's easier to agree with your cage than to spend every day resenting it. So I built an identity around it. I called it introversion. I gave it a name that sounded like a personality trait instead of a survival strategy. And then I lived inside that identity for years, declining things, avoiding things and people, limiting myself, not because that was who I was, but because that was who I had agreed to be. And the terrifying thing about this kind of identity is that it's comfortable. It has a name, it has an aesthetic, people respect it. Nobody questions you when you say you're an introvert. They just nod and give you space. And the space feels like safety until it starts to feel like a smaller and smaller room. Maybe this one sounds familiar. Some of us were in primary school, standing at the front of a classroom for a presentation, and you made a mistake, stumbled over a word, forgot a line, or your voice came out smaller or trembled more than you wanted it to, and the class laughed. In that moment, that one singular, completely forgettable to everyone else moment, something got decided. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not someone who speaks in front of people. That is not me. And we carried it into secondary school, into the university, into adulthood, into every room where we had something worth saying and stayed quiet instead, because of a classroom we stood in 20 years ago. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not talking about trauma, not PTSD, which is real and a specific clinical experience. This is something quieter, something we don't have a clean name for. It's a story that started with one sentence and became so rehearsed and so settled into the body, into your nervous system, that it started to feel like a fact. It was never a fact. It was a conclusion drawn from a single moment by a child who was just doing their best. And then there's the one I built myself, completely consciously, with full awareness, and with what I genuinely believed was growth. I don't care. I've said it so many times like a mantra, it almost became true. Wore it like a personality, like a vibe, like something worth being proud of. And honestly, it worked for a while. And the thing about I don't care as an identity is that it's incredibly seductive because it looks like strength. It looks like you've evolved past needing things from people, past being affected, past the messiness of actually wanting something and risking not getting it. It's the emotional version of living unread, except you're leaving yourself unread. But here's what I know now. Unbothered people don't have to perform being unbothered. They just are. And if you've ever had to remind yourself not to care, to talk yourself down from caring, to convince yourself that the thing that just happened doesn't matter, then you care. And that's not a weakness. That's actually one of the most human things about you. But I spent a long time calling it something else. Calling it unbothered. I called it detached. I called it evolved because caring felt dangerous. Still does, to be honest. Caring meant you could be hurt. And I had decided, somewhere quietly, that I was not someone who got hurt. I almost believed it too. So here's the part where I have to tell you something that might make this worse before it makes it better. Psychologists have studied what happens when you try to revise your self-concept, specifically when you try to remove a part of your identity rather than add to it. And the research is kind of devastating. Letting go of who you are not is significantly harder than building who you are. Like we all know, adding a new habit is hard. Running 3 times a week, drinking more water, journaling consistently, but unbecoming something, Dropping an identity you've carried for years, even when it doesn't fit anymore, that's a different level of hard. Because those false versions of you served a purpose. They kept you safe, they kept people around, they kept the peace, they kept you from wanting things and risking not getting them. And your nervous system, which has been running this particular software for years, does not want to uninstall it. So this is supposed to feel uncomfortable. If you're sitting with something right now, some identity you've been half aware doesn't fit, and it's making you feel resistant or defensive or just tired, that's not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that you're doing it right. There's this philosopher, Kierkegaard, 19th century, Danish, chronically in his feelings, genuinely one of the most emotionally honest thinkers who ever put pen to paper. And he wrote one line that I keep coming back to. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Sit with that. The most common form, not the dramatic despair, not the kind that announces itself and needs an audience. The quiet kind. The kind that looks like a perfectly functional life. The kind that sits behind a smile in a photo and behind a routine that works on paper, behind an identity that everyone has accepted, including you. The introvert who was just a person who was kept inside, the public speaker who was just a child who had a bad day, and the unbothered one who actually cares more than almost anyone she knows. That's not the dramatic kind of lost. That's the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks up on you slowly until one day you're standing in your own life and wondering why it feels like it belongs to someone else. Dear Dark Diary, this is part 1. And I'm not going to wrap it up neatly yet, because honestly, I don't think it should be wrapped up yet. But I want to leave you with one thing before the next episode, before part 2. Think of one identity you've been wearing that was never yours. Just one. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Just know it. Sit with it. Let it be uncomfortable. And we'll deal with it when I get back. Dear Dark Diary, thank you for being here tonight. Actually here, not just playing it in the background while you doom scroll. For sitting in this weird, heavy, beautiful dark of it with me. Because I think that's the most underrated thing we can do. Just look at the thing. The identity you've been performing. The version of yourself you've built to survive something. The feelings you're too online to admit you have. And there's something kind of sacred about not looking away. And if this one found you somewhere real, send it to someone who needs it too. Take care of yourself and not the performance of it, the real thing. Until next time, keep the diary close. Good night.